There it is. Pressurized. And I can take this, plug it in. Ain't gonna work with that. Hey, what is up, my dudes? This is gonna be a relatively short video, probably. I don't know. I am excited. So, whenever you scroll Facebook Marketplace, you tend to find things that you probably don't need. And in this case, I found something that I want but don't need for Sasha. And the original pricing, or OEM, whatever, the manufacturer pricing, there you go, for this thing is somewhere around 700 bucks, and then you got to pay import fees and shipping and all that sort of stuff. So needless to say, it's an expensive purchase. I found one for $350 on Facebook Marketplace. So I'm heading over right now to check this thing out, and hopefully it is pretty good. The dude said that he owned it, or had it for his truck. I don't know what kind of truck, doesn't really matter. But he had it for his truck, and ended up selling the truck. Only used the thing a couple of times, and doesn't need it anymore, obviously, because he doesn't have the truck. I don't like showing other people on camera that, like, if I'm buying something, it just feels kind of weird. So I'm gonna go ahead and buy it if I do, and if I don't, well, there won't be a video. So I'll see you guys in a second. I may have spent a lot more than I was expecting to today, and everything is totally fine. I bought an air compressor. I bought an ARB Twin. 350 bucks is what he was asking, basically. It's a $700 thing. Now, it doesn't have the wiring harness with it, which kind of sucks, but it's fine. I'll order a new wiring harness from ARB, or honestly, I can make my own. It's really not that big of a deal. And I looked up the instructions online, and they have a wiring diagram built in, so I already know what each of the wires goes for. So, yeah. That aside, he totaled his Tacoma somehow, unfortunately. Like, it really sucks. But he had built the thing out like crazy. He said that the failure point was in the suspension. He put too much weight on it, and then the lower end of the truck just kind of gave away. So I also picked up a Overland Vehicle Systems 270-degree awning and a set of rock sliders for the truck, which is fantastic. I've been needing sliders. I've been needing to upgrade to something that aren't the steps that I have right now. And he told me, basically, he's like, you know what? I'll give you the awning, the sliders, and the ARB for $1,000. And I was like, done. That's like $3,000, $4,000 worth of parts right there. And you're giving it to me for, you know, almost 25% of what it's worth. I'm in. So, yeah. I suppose we're going to be doing some installs, huh? This video specifically is for the ARB Twin. This is great. Let's go put this thing in, shall we? So I have more stuff now, which is a good thing. I went on the Google and I found parts and pieces that I need to install this air compressor. And we're going to see if we can't install it today. But I went to, what is this company called? Grimmoffroad, G-R-I-M-M Off-Road. And I found a mounting plate to be able to mount this thing inside of the engine bay. So it's going to go just behind the air filter box, or like the intake filter box thing. But yeah, so I'm going to pull out all the parts and stuff that are in this kit. I'm going to look at it. I also went on Amazon and got some wiring harnesses. Basically, whenever you get this kit from ARB, it's going to have multiple switches on the wiring harness so that you can install like your air lockers and that kind of stuff. I don't have any air lockers right now. Eventually, I will be putting in a front air locker as like a just-in-case scenario. But I want these switches to be, well, basically not going anywhere. I just want the singular one that runs to my Switch Pros so I can kick the compressor on and off to be able to use it for all of the things. So this is it. We have our mounting plate here. which I don't remember exactly what direction and orientation this is going to be inside of the thing. I think it goes this way. I don't entirely know how to install this just yet, so I'm going to look up the instructions online, and then I'm going to show you them visually right here. But basically, I'm going to show you the spot that it goes in inside of the engine bay. We're going to undo a couple of bolts in there to be able to mount the bracket, and we're also going to be mounting the compressor onto the bracket, running the lines, and then whenever the second wiring harness gets here, the power supply one, then I'll be plugging that in for you too. I am grabbing myself here a 10mm socket, and then well, you're going to be taking 3 of the supplied 10mm bolts, as well as this singular bracket. I'm going to go ahead and pop the hood, and I'll show you where we need to be installing this bracket. I'll wait for the wind to die down a little bit. Engine bay, air box, and then you have 3 bolts right here, 1, 2, and 3. This center one is going to be going to the horn, and don't worry about this, I'm doing an experiment. But the center one's going to the horn. We're going to have to undo that and relocate the horn to the rear bolt. But I'm going to take all 3 of these out. I'm going to use the supplied 10mm bolts to install this bracket like this. So you've got the little 3-hole side, then you got the 2-hole on top, and it's going to mount right there. Just to show you, I ended up bending the little mounting tab upwards so that it wasn't in the way and causing any clearance issues. But all 3 of those bolts are in. It's recommended 7 foot-pounds of torque. I just went hand torque, so it's probably fine. It's probably actually more than 7. 7's really small. Awesome. So next, we're going to take a little bit of thread tape, do a couple of thin wraps of that. That's probably plenty. Squish it down. And we will be installing it on the back side of this guy right here. So I believe this is a 1-inch, and then I'm just going to use an all 16ths on this probably to keep spinning it in. That is now on there really tight. I mean, the threads aren't all the way in, but it is quite tight, so I am hoping that that is good enough. If it's not, then I'll have to maybe take off a wrap or something of the thread protector and then redo it. But I'll only know once the air is flowing in the compressor. So next we're going to be putting the actual ARB onto the bracket, which basically it's going to mount on this way and go into, I think it's the outer 4 holes. Moving down to the floor of the garage here. I did not buy this ARB Twin from ARB itself, so I had to get my own bolts, but these are 6mm by 1.0 bolts that run in them into the bottom. If you guys are getting this from ARB, then those should already be included in the kit, but it's only recommended to use 4, so it's probably only 4 bolts that come with the kit, but because I have them, I installed 6 just because, and then those are also going to be 7 pounds of torque. So yeah. Next is the outlet here for the compressor. We have another one of these little elbow fittings, so we're going to take the big side, wrap it in some thread tape, and then screw it on in, and then we'll use the line that's been given to us, I'll show you that, to connect the 2 elbows. We want it to be angled forward towards the front of the truck, and then we can use the supplied Grimmoffroad or Grim Speed, whatever the name is, braided airline, which is rubber coated as well. Wow, this is super high quality. Wow, this is so cool. I'm going to wrap this in Teflon. I'm going to wrap the other one in Teflon, and then basically we're going to run this to there. Okay, so now we got those in there, and this is a 14mm-ish. Tighten that one, tighten that one. I have this aligned going towards the back per the instructions, and then it's running around to the front in front of the filters, coming up underneath here to this one. And then I also put the air chuck on. Next is wiring, which I don't have all the wiring, as we already discussed. Okay, so I'm gonna set y'all down inside of the engine bay here where you can look at me while I'm doing stuff. So the next step is to get our air box off, or at least part of it. So we got a 10mm that undoes the air box upper portion from the intake itself. And I'm gonna go ahead and undo that real quick. So you don't have to take that completely off, you just have to loosen it a little bit. Oop, you guys are crooked. Sorry about that. Then you go ahead and undo these two little clips, just like that. And then slide that off there. It's a great time to look at your air filter too, by the way. I am doing this a little bit out of order. The company recommends doing basically all of the wiring so that it's ready to go once you have it in here, but I don't have the rest of my wiring, as you guys already know, because I told you. So I'm gonna go ahead and mount everything else in here. So we have, let's see, this does go here, yep. Is this a 10? Nope. So we have two 13mm nuts, and then we have our 10mm bolt and nut. So you're gonna need two things, probably a 10mm wrench and a socket, so that you can get that installed. So go ahead and reach in here, and we'll lay this dude down. I'll show you those mounting holes here in a second, but we'll take our 10mm bolt, and we have a flat washer. Drop it through there. Second 10mm bolt, second flat washer. Drop it through there. Then we have our itty bitty little 10mm thingamadoo there. Let's see if we can't finagle this on. Might be easier to completely remove the air box, but unfortunately mine is hooked up to a snorkel, which means it's a little bit more difficult for me to take it off. So for those of you that have seen my Spiker Engineering hood strut video, and you're wondering, or you've just kind of seen them around, and you're wondering why I went with the single instead of the double, because the double would make it a little bit more even for how the hood sits, and I didn't want that. And the reason is because of this. So the ARB Twin, unfortunate. So what I was talking about here before the wind so rudely interrupted me is the Spiker Engineering hood struts that I purchased for the Tacoma, so I could have gas struts instead of having to use the little hood prop thing. Really annoying. Basically it comes in a dual pack or a single pack, and I opted for the single because on the passenger side the hood strut where it would mount is going to get in the way of the ARB air compressor mount, so I'd have to do some fancy finagling in order to get both of those to kind of work together pseudo in a way. So instead of doing that, Spiker Engineering makes a sturdier or stronger singular hood strut that is only on the driver's side, that's strong enough in order to lift the hood. But downside is the hood doesn't sit perfectly flat because it's always got that pressure on the driver's side. So if you guys have seen in any of my videos, it looks like my hood isn't completely level. That is why. Too big of a deal. And once again, I believe these are 7 foot-pounds. That feels like 7. Once again, great time to empty, clean, replace, whatever you want, your air filter if you haven't done that in a while. At least it forces you to look at it. I think it's worth noting that to get the air box on and off, or like the cover, you're going to have to remove your ARB air filters. Also, I need to get another filter cover for this, so I got to figure out how to do that. But you got to take those off in order to be able to get the box on and off, because it's a little bit wider. Cool. Well, that's installed. Looks really good. You know, nice and compact in the engine bay. So now we wait for the rest of the wiring, and then I have full access to these plugs back here. It might be a little bit annoying, if anything, to be able to like reach in here and grab these, because it gets pretty tight, but it's not that big of a deal. See you in, I don't know, a couple of weeks, whenever the heck I have my wiring to be able to run this and plug it in. My dudes, I am hot, I am sweaty, but I am mildly successful in feeling. So, truck's running right now. I'm going to tell you about the wiring here in a second, but it works, at least at the moment, and it hasn't exploded. Let me show you what I've done. So, I went ahead and relocated a whole bunch of stuff from the battery. I got the big wiring harness, which is the big fat plug up there. It has two, like, 4-gauge, or I think it's 4-gauge wire coming out of it. That's red. Two of the same that's black, and then one tiny little, like 12 or 14 gauge, maybe 18. Anyways, so that's running through this thick harness here, coming through the trim piece here, which you can literally take off by just pulling upwards, and it'll pop the body clips out. and then it comes out here where it splits. And I've got the big ground and the little ground attaching to the side of my battery terminal, and on the positive side both fuses are going into the same connection on the positive side. So that's the power. So with the power run to it, I need a form of switch to turn it on, which I have my Switch Pros, and so that's where my journey began. So the second harness that ARB includes in the kit is the one with the purple and the black wire here. It's got a couple little plugs that stick out, which are specifically for the solenoids for your air lockers. So I have that run all the way over to here, and then from Switch Pros I purchased this little 3-wire piece with the plug. The yellow and the red are for your solenoids for your air lockers. Sorry, the yellow and the green, and then the red is the power on supply. So I ran the power on to one of the 35 amp switches from the Switch Pros, and that's the button that is powered off of, and it turns on, and all I have to do is connect the air chuck and then it'll do its thing. Now I spent quite a long time staring at wiring diagrams last night and today, trying to figure out why I have so many cable bundles, to figure out which ones I actually needed in order to make this thing work, and also try not to overthink it. So if we go over here, I had 4 wiring harnesses. I had the power from ARB, I had the other wire loom from ARB, I had my Switch Pros connector, and then I had this extension from the what was it? Grimmoffroad. The Grimmoffroad extension is specifically for if you're running an ARB power switch on the side of their bracket, and so that power cable, the one with the funky plugs that I have running with the Switch Pros, that is where you'd plug that extension in and you'd run it to your switch that would be right here, and you'd wire that in. Obviously I don't have that, so I didn't use that. Instead I used the ARB plug and ran it to my Switch Pros. Now this one came with that other wiring harness, and I don't really entirely know what it's for. My guess is that, well, I mean, I do. This is my educated guess. Basically, you have 2 different leads that have a bunch of different wires coming out of them. One of them says isolating switch, the other one says switch 1, and the third one says switch 2. Switch 1 and 2, those are what are going to be going to the plugs for your solenoids for your air lockers. And I believe the isolating switch is the one that runs to your power toggle switch from like inside of the cab. And then these last two wires coming out here, the blue and the red, I don't really know what those are for. The wiring diagram does not do a really good job of describing it. This is it right here. It does have all the different individual colors, but there's a lot more wires than there are colors here. I don't have air lockers right now, so I'm not going to worry about it. The only thing that I really cared about wiring up is making sure that the air chuck connection had air, right? Which means that it needed to be able to kick on the twin so that I can air up my tires, was pretty much the goal. So I'm going to keep those other wiring harnesses, and then whenever I get that front air locker, I'm going to have to figure out how to connect that in. I don't really understand that system. I think the solenoids are there because you have an extra, kind of like an air tank that probably is just going to act as a buffer, so your compressor doesn't have to be on all the time. It's really small. And then I think those solenoids are just sensing pressure, so when it gets too low in the locker, because it's going to naturally leak air. When it gets too low in the locker, it'll kick the compressor back on in order to refill that air tank in order to maintain pressure on your locker. I think that's what that's there for, but like I said, I don't have it right now, so I'm not even going to bother getting into any of that. If you guys have questions on that, you can reach out to ARB and maybe see what they recommend, or hang out on the channel because I don't know, a few months, a year, something like that. It's going to be a little while, but I am going to be getting an air locker, and I'm going to have to figure it out for myself, and there will be a video on it. So, yeah. I'm really excited. This is super cool. One thing that I forgot to mention real quick. For that wiring harness, I think most of the time when you're installing this, you're running the cables into the truck, which means that you have access to things like keyed sources. And what that is basically it makes sure that the truck is running before the compressor can turn on. So I don't know which wires they are, but a couple of the wires, or at least one of the wires in there, is specifically for that. And I believe for the switches for your lockers, because that switch 1, switch 2 has a bunch of different cables or wires coming out of it. So I think a couple of those are going to be running to the solenoids that operate the air stuff going to the locker, and then the rest of them run to the switch. So it'll be a signal coming from the switch, a power supply going to the switch, a backlight that'll be going to the switch that's also going to have another cable that hooks into your car's lighting system, so that when you turn your headlights on, you get the pretty backlight on the locker switches. So obviously most of that isn't really necessary, and I have a Switch Pros, so I don't need any of that. It's all extra. So once again, I'm spending money on stuff that I don't need, but it's really not that big of a deal. But yeah. Hey guys, it's me from the future, from the me that you just saw in the video, but it's actually me from the past if you're watching this video. Think about that. I wanted to show you the gear setup that I use with the ARB Twin right now. I bought a Amazon air hose, basically, and with that I also bought a tire plug-in connector, so I can run the airline to the air chuck off of the Grimmoffroad mounting bracket, and then from there, you know, get to the individual tires. So let me pull this thing out, and I'm just going to show you what I'm using. I like to cover the truck whenever I'm going to have it out of use for a long period of time, so that it doesn't get destroyed by the sun. But inside of my deck system, and shameless plug for other videos on my channel, this is where I keep the airline. So I bought this little coiled air hose. It reaches every single tire on the truck from that air chuck connection, which is pretty awesome. That end was pre-installed from the factory, wherever I bought this from on Amazon. I just plug it right in, and then the other piece is going to be this right here, which basically you have a little toggle plug right here, which snaps onto the valve stem, and then I have a gauge with a little push button, so I can plug it in. It shows me the tire pressure, and then I can squeeze this little gauge or little valve right here, which is spring return. It'll fill up the tire with the air from the ARB, and then when I let go, I can read the pressure that's on it, and that's how I do that. So super cool, super easy, back to me from the past in the past. Anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed. If you have, please like and subscribe. Please hang out with me again. I've got so many things that are happening on this channel all the time. Yeah, I've got a 270 awning that's going to be installed in the truck next. That's going to be the next big upgrade for that one. And then if you guys care about fast cars, my Mazda Speed, I've got a front-mounted intercooler I'm going to be installing on that. If not, then hang out around the channel, because Sasha's going to be getting out on another trip here soon, and it's currently in the planning stages, so we're really excited. I'm not going to give too much away. With that, I will see you guys next time. Don't forget to live from dusk till dawn, my dudes. Catch you later.